Stare our gaze out windows, getting lost in months ago, thinking about all those highs and the lows. Turn a blind eye. Rose glasses make it alright. I know that we said we're far past repair, but what if I say I don't need
Hi there, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the Political Deep Dive. I'm Dave Valente. And this week, I'm very excited. This is our first guest since we've restarted the show. And so I'll introduce him here in a moment. Jordan Hunter is from or lives from Dayton, Ohio. I'm sorry, and is studying at the University of Glasgow, Scotland. He's currently in the United States on vacation, and he's the investigations editor at the Glasgow Guardian, which is the independent newspaper for the University of Glasgow. And in November, Jordan had a front row seat to uh, the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, Scotland. So we're really excited to talk to him and get his flavor of what happened there, especially with the protests and what came of the program. So, Jordan, nice
Hey,
to see you, sir. How you doing?
doing all right.
And let me bring in our one of our panelists, Mr. Dan, the man Fishman. How you doing, Dan?
Good, good. Hiya, Jordan.
Hello.
All right. So, Jordan, you are investigations editor at the Glasgow Guardian. Tell us what that is.
So, investigations editor basically kind of covers both the news aspect. So, for COP26, I was like in the streets covering protests, but then also on the side, I kind of do longer term investigations into kind of things going around in the university sphere, but also the local sphere. So, for instance, recently one of my investigations was published nationally, where I kind of detailed about how there's been these large spikes in cheating in academics across Scotland. So it's been great. Can hopefully looking to continue.
Excellent, excellent. Well, and we can tell the influence of living in Glasgow. How long have you lived in Glasgow?
This will be my 4th year.
Fourth year. So we can tell the influence of the life in Glasgow on your accent there.
The brogue.
Yes, very nice, very nice. I really like that. So,
Where are you from originally, Jordan?
From Dayton.
Gotcha.
So you had the front row seat of being at the COP26, which is probably the largest international conference we had this year or the past year. I'm sorry. Um, eh, for people who aren't really aware of what COP26 was, go ahead and explain what that conference was.
Right. So everyone remembers kind of the Paris Agreement and the Paris Climate Conference that happened 5 years ago. Basically, COP is Conference of the Parties, where people come together every year. It's not just every 5 years, but since Paris, they kind of agreed that every fifth COP was supposed to be a very big event where they basically come to the table to set new objectives. This is kind of called the ratchet mechanism, where you're basically supposed to set new goals, new targets for your countries to hit, for every country to hit. And so Glasgow was supposed to be the first one, which was why it was kind of a big deal, because it was kind of defining of what after Paris was supposed to look like. How big are these agreements supposed to be? How big is this conference supposed to be? And it's fairly sizable. And we'll get into how successful it was, but yeah, it was a pretty big deal as far as like climate change goes, and as far as the UN is concerned.
Yeah. So we were talking about that off air. How many people participated? I heard that there were 10,000 delegates, and you told me about the support staff and all of that. So go ahead and kind of go over those numbers of
Yeah,
how many people.
so there was about 20,000 as far as like delegates, support staff, and like people being sent in by like the countries themselves. But then there was large amounts of people coming in for protesting. So they were saying anywhere between 30 to 50,000 a day. Sometimes they're being upwards of 100,000. So it was very big as far as like people coming into this very Glasgow is a very big city for the UK, is not very big by, I think, like by a lot of US standards or global standards. So it was a bit crowded, but it was very interesting because I remember I was just going on the train, like on my daily commute, and you'd be rubbing elbows with US dignitaries on the finance committee screaming about some BS thing that they'd had to deal with that day. So it was interesting, but it was also very, very congested.
Yeah.
Not COVID friendly.
I'm sure this is, right as the Omicron variant was starting to emerge. It hadn't quite made it over yet, but it was, right between that Delta and Omicron variant. So yeah, I guess it had decent timing in that it didn't happen right as the Omicron variant coming into the United Kingdom at that point.
Yeah. I mean, COVID is still a concern over there. And it was kind of interesting because COVID has been I would say very much more regulated over there as far as more mandates, more likely to shut down businesses. Uh, for instance, it wasn't until May that many people were able to see their hairdresser. And that's May of this year. So it's been very interesting as far as how they've managed COVID, and then also suddenly having this very big event where everyone from around the world is coming.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it makes me question though, because I mean, I used to do model Arab League in college, and it's just a modeled after the Arab League, 23 Arab states getting together to discuss policy, that type of thing. And it's hard to get people to come together over 3 days to craft anything that had any teeth to it. We weren't constrained by having to get it approved by our assemblies or whatever. It was just people in the room talking about certain issues, and 23 people. It's hard to get consensus. It seems like it's just an impossible task to get 10,000, 20,000 people to really agree on anything of substantial purpose.
Yeah. I mean, consensus was kind of a big issue for this conference. The big kind of file package that they had was delayed. They kind of went into what they called overtime, where the conference had technically almost ended, and they were just kind of supposed to have wrapped up, but they were going to continue these negotiations until basically people had to physically leave. And they came together with some sort of deal where a lot of things were watered down, mostly because of objections by India and China, which was a very interesting combination. But yeah, consensus was a big issue. But we also saw some places where there was consensus around some topics that we might not have foreseen. For instance, deforestation in Brazil. Bolsonaro seemingly got behind the idea of not deforesting the Amazon. But, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that was probably the most interesting thing was Bolsonaro agreeing to ending deforestation. Now, actually, I think it was reversing deforestation was how they phrased it by 2030, which hey, plant new trees and all that good stuff. I'm all for that. But yeah, I think the proof is in what they deliver, and what his partisans in Brazil will allow him to deliver, because that forestation, the big agribusiness in Brazil really kind of holds the reins of power, at least within his party. So they may not be so keen as to plant trees where they have their large farms and cattle industry there. So
I mean, that kind of that could also be said for a lot of countries, though. For instance, like the US during Paris, as well as the EU, said that they were going to give $100 billion to the developing world to kind of ascertain more of a transition to green technology, green infrastructure, and that hasn't been delivered upon. So all these promises that they make, they might have just made for the sense of kind of coming together, seeming to come together on the global stage, but then we might not actually see any real change. So
yeah, that's always the concern. I mean, remember, we did Paris in 2016, and Donald Trump comes in and pretty much abrogates it until Biden comes back, and Biden re-signs onto the Paris Climate Accords. But it was 4 years that we were supposed to be doing stuff, and people can have their feelings about what the United States should be doing when it comes to climate change. But we had signed on to an agreement, and then we just said, no, it really kind of hits at your trustworthiness as far as a country negotiating in future compacts, which may have things that you really want to have done. I think two things that really hit at us from the Trump administration was the Paris climate treaty and the joint the JCPOA with regards to Iran, where we both abrogated both of those agreements and really hurt our reputation internationally. I mean, I get that there are problems with both of those things, but I think more negotiation was better than just saying, tearing it up and moving on. But so you covered most of the protests. Tell us what those were like.
Yeah, so the protests were kind of interesting in that they were very diversified. So you had, for instance, Greta. She was interestingly more protesting about kind of like in conjunction with local labor groups, or like kind of more the labor unions that were on strike at the time, because a number of labor unions went on strike as kind of like leverage against COP26. Because obviously, like for instance, COP26 wasn't going to happen if the trains were shut or if the bins weren't getting taken away. So there was a lot more of her doing that. But then you had a lot more of, like, for instance, Extinction Rebellion was very present, but you had a lot more performative pieces from them. So for instance, you had, I think they're called the Red Priestesses, where they kind of do this weird dance. But you also had some more traditional protests by other groups. But it was very interesting. I think the biggest thing that was I hadn't really seen that, or what was very interesting about the protests that I saw was that there was a lot more emphasis on trying to like bring in developing countries into the table, which I think, as far as climate change, that's been kind of something that's been not really focused on too much until recently. But I think that's something that made this COP a bit different, was the actual kind of like more push for developing countries to kind of take a step forward as far as that being part of the whole climate debate.
Excellent. Let me bring in another one of our panelists, Care Bear, my sister, Kara. How you doing, Care Bear?
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So we're talking with Jordan Hunter about the COP26 climate conference that happened in November. He was describing the protest situation there.
Did you go to Greta's speech?
Yeah, I was front and center because we were accredited media for the event, but we could only send one person into the actual conference hall. But our pass could kind of be used for all these other things. So I was able to kind of get to the very front of Greta's speech, which was interesting because that was like kind of like, I would say, the biggest protest. She gave two speeches and did two different marches. The first one was quite large, and then the second one was a bit smaller. But it was very interesting because it was a lot more like, she was probably, of the speakers list, kind of like getting back to my earlier point, she's kind of the only one from the global north. Yeah. A lot of them were either, like, for instance, indigenous peoples coming to yell at Bolsonaro, or there was people who were talking about, like, for instance, in the Tuvalu, where they're like, they're about to be underwater. So there was a bit more diversity with that, which I thought was kind of interesting.
I confess that I want her to yell at me at some point. Because she has that great, how dare you? How dare you disregard our future? I can't help it. That means I'm a terrible person, but she's got that voice. Yeah, Tuvalu, it's interesting because you're saying that, they have their biggest export right now is domain names, because they are .tv. Mm-hmm. And so, like, even if their country were to go underwater, they would still have all this money coming in from TV around the country for the rest of the world. So I like the conspiracy theory that people want .tv to become public domain. So that's why they're trying to warm the earth.
We're going to sink the country and take it over as public domain.
So one of the things that people talk about all the times is when they have giant climate conferences like this, there's a little bit of hypocrisy in that people fly there, etc. Were there any sessions that were, at least suggested or said, "Oh, we're going to offer these remotely for anybody who wants to participate"?
So that's very interesting. So XR, like Extinction Rebellion, in 2020, because obviously it was supposed to happen in 2020 because Paris was 2015, but got kicked back a year because of COVID. But XR, after it got canceled in 2020, was like, wait a second, why don't we, if this is going to be a green conference, why don't we just do things online? And there's kind of a bigger, broader political purpose for this, which was they wanted or at least Boris wanted to be in Glasgow, because he wanted to show the strength of the UK in Scotland, and kind of like showing the value of the Union, because that's still a very salient issue in with the UK right now. But there was loads of hypocrisy all around. For instance, I think it was like the Japanese, it was either a royal official or one of their dignitaries was coming in, and to practice landing, they basically got a plane to do the same landing 5 different times at 3 different airports, just to make sure they could find the best ones. That way the official was safe.
Funny.
And then you had other things such as Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates apparently flying in on private jets and helicopters, which didn't go amiss. And there was just kind of a lot of general, like, little things that people were like, that's not very green. Why are they doing this? Another thing was talking about like all the waste that was probably going to come from this. Obviously they're having this many people is going to generate a lot of like paper, and going to generate a lot of other kind of like novelty waste that they're going to just throw away. It didn't help because the bin men were, as I said, on strike. So it was a bit of a mess for a little bit, but they eventually got off a strike. So
Yeah.
Just for the Americans, bin men means the trash men.
yeah.
Gabriel, what you want to know about the COP26 conference?
What do I want to know about it, or what
Yeah.
do you want?
Well, either one.
No, I actually, I'm a big admirer of Greta Thunberg, because she's a special kid. She has autism, and so a number of my students also do. And so I'm a middle school teacher for children who have been diagnosed with emotional disturbances, and I teach science, so that's been a big part of my focus, the conference, and especially Greta Thunberg, and sharing her with my students who, as disconnected as they may be from academics, they found her fascinating and inspiring, which I thought was a big move.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jordan, what are your personal thoughts about climate change? Is it man-made? Is it?
I mean, yeah, I think it's kind of impossible to at this point to say that climate change is not severely impacted by human action. That's the biggest driver of it. As the thing I mostly take issue with is the way that we decide to number things. So for instance, like the UN has obviously set this like 2-degree Celsius limit, but they're very fungible with how they think about that. So for instance, COP26 was like keep 1.5 alive. And then they're like, well, we're keeping it alive, but just barely. And then some scientists are saying, well, it's already 1.7. Some say, even if we keep the pledges that everyone's saying we're going to keep, it's still over 2. And then all of this is assuming that people actually do keep to what they're supposed to do. So like the numbers about where we decide to demarcate things is where I usually draw an issue. Like, so what is 2 degrees? Like, what does that look like? But overall, yeah, it's man-made. It definitely needs to be addressed. I think the way we address it is going to be the most critical thing, because obviously you need to be able to do it sustainably, but you also need to do it in a way that makes sense. You're not just doing things I think there's a lot of times that people do the green thing that's actually not that green, but we do it because we think that it's helping. for instance, recycling in a lot of ways actually doesn't
Exactly
work.
it.
Yeah.
Well, but people want to feel like they have some ability to contribute to the change and to make things better. And I think the thing that has alarmed me the most is that with the polar ice caps melting, the release of methane is so much worse than what, we've talked about with human control, human contributions and cow farts or whatever. That's where, we've started this snowball that we may not be able to stop. And I think everybody wants to feel like they're doing their part. So if it's something that, like recycling, in some areas of the country, it's very minimally done. And, may or may not have the greatest effect, but if it keeps people thinking about it, keeps it front of mind, keeps people committed to doing their part, or at least feeling like they're having some effect, I don't see a downside to it, even if it's not as helpful as we.
Yeah,
Right. The question is, people should do what they feel like doing, but being told that it's an imperative, the greatest example is, recycling newspaper is actually a terrible idea. There are more trees in North America now than when the Pilgrims landed because of our commercial paper industry. So the best thing you can do if you want more trees is to consume more paper. Recycling causes all these chemicals, stuff like that. And in reality, we could bury all the newspapers, but it is something that is easy to recycle. It's just not good for the earth. So we have all these people doing these things because they're like, oh, it's really easy to do. But it's not, people, the number one thing that people could do is they could conserve water. Fresh water is an incredible resource, really easy to do. Americans, and I confess that up until 3 years ago, I used to let the water run, or for our British friends, the tap run while I was brushing my teeth. Okay. And then somebody pointed out to me, that's stupid. You shouldn't do that anymore because you're wasting a ton of water. Showering, stuff like that. All these things that we really can do that make an enormous difference. Fresh water, those are big things. Nobody talks about that. They talk about the things that sort of have a big effect on industry rather than on actual saving of the earth.
Just circling back to the methane thing. So kind of a long story, but I knew someone from the BBC who needs somebody to be in the background of this tech show called Click. And so while I was there, they were doing a thing about COP26 and about the whole methane issue. And one thing that I kind of learned was it's not actually cow farts that are the issue. It's actually cow burps and their breathing. It's mostly respiratory. But that makes it a lot easier to like help. We can, for instance, create a mask for cows versus trying to have to, like, I remember was the people talking about these flatulence chambers. It's a lot easier if you just do it the front way than trying to have to do it the reverse. But that was something that I thought was super cool. But also, for instance, there's other ways that we can do that. For instance, sustainable farming with, like they said, seaweed supposedly drops down that methane significantly. As far as if you're talking about agriculture, just by feeding them seaweed, it's a lot easier. But then, as you said, like the bigger issue is getting those polar ice caps, which we don't really know. That's something that's going to take a lot more time and effort, but it's a good start,
Yeah.
Well, and going back to the cow issue and water, beef takes, I think it's 1,650 gallons of water to produce a pound of beef. And I am far from a vegan. I had beef tonight. But I also recognize that it's probably something that if we all did it once a week less, or didn't consume as much as we used to, we could make some sense of it, at least make a dent in it.
I'm a big fan of Meatless Mondays.
Meatless Mondays, but I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and so we have serious water issues here. We have an underground aquifer that hasn't been replenished very well because it's been so dry for several years. And Kirtland Air Force Base has been poisoning that aquifer over the last 35, 40 years with jet fuel.
Mhm.
And I've attended a number of community meetings where they've talked about how they're remediating it. And one of the ways is they just attach every engine they can and burn it off in turbines. And just seems like such an incredibly toxic way to do that.
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing? Thanks, Air Force.
And that's Kara's not a libertarian, but we as libertarians were like, one of the worst polluters around is the government. The government does dumb things. I mean, Kara, you remember that mine accident, the Animas River, where it turned it orange because the government, forced that mining company to open the mine, and it dumped out all that water into the Animas River, and
they refused to be sued over it.
Yes, covered them from lawsuit. Yeah, which holy cow! I mean, it
is that's one of the biggest points, is that most governments in the world have an agency similar to the EPA, right? The Environmental Protection Agency. But in reality, what those agencies do is they protect corporations and give them licenses to pollute the environment at a level that the government says, okay, this is what you paid for. And the best example of that is when BP spills, untold amounts of gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. The EPA stoked in and said, you know what? The maximum damages here is $40 billion. That's it. You can't sue them. So everybody who wants damages from BP, put them into a pool, we'll figure out what your percentage of $40 billion is. And that's it. Look, BP, here we are, 10, 15 years afterwards. I confess, I don't even remember how long ago it was. They're this hugely successful oil company. It wasn't even a blip on their financial radar because the government said, here's the slap on the hand. When in reality, if people had actually been able to sue them for what they're worth, BP would be gone and we would be better off. And because, several friends of mine are like, accidents like that don't have to happen. Engineers can build fail-safe systems. The thing is that it's not worth it to them because they know their damages are going to be capped.
Right.
And so why would they spend billions and billions of dollars in designing a foolproof system when the world is building greater fools all the time for them?
Yeah. All right. So Jordan, what are your thoughts or what are your predictions as far as how successful this conference is going to end up being?
I think there's kind of a big problem of the fact that it was very much, for instance, there's the cheap, easy deals that they got done fairly quickly, such as on methane and deforestation. I think a lot of those are going to be harder, even though they seem like there's a lot more broader consensus around them. They were very much more ambiguous with not much real discussion about like how that was going to practically happen.
Yeah,
I'm much more ambivalent about that. However, the big deal, right, that they got about starting to talk about fossil fuels for the first time, I was shocked to find out that had never really been like fossil fuels for generations now. We have known has been like kind of the big issue as far as like climate change goes. The UN doesn't talk about it.
Well, you want to know why? The previous COP climate conferences are sponsored by fossil fuel industry.
Oh, and they still are. I think it was that was another one of those hypocrisies. I was like, okay, why are these people sponsoring it? But I was more understanding that because a lot of it was we're toning down subsidies. That was kind of the language that kind of took on. Granted, there is still like kind of this watering down of language to phase out, not phase out, phase down. They critically changed that. And then to inefficient fuel, whatevers. But the way that they talked about doing it was through limiting subsidies for these industries, which I think is a lot more achievable. Makes it more of a trade issue, which is a lot more enforceable. And it kind of just sounds better, right? Like it's something that, if they like fossil fuels don't need to should have to compete with the rest of the market. subsidies in general, we can talk about them, but like subsidizing those kinds of industries especially are probably like, if they can't stand on their own, why should the government give them money?
Right.
Exactly. I mean, that's a big conversation here in West Virginia. Where I was in a radio studio a few weeks ago. We were talking about alternate fuels, and I was talking about, let's start talking about thorium nuclear reactors and things like that, rather than just reliance on coal. And people were like, "Oh no, we're going to build even cleaner coal," and it's like the amount of investment to put into a diminishing resource like that is just it's not going to happen. Um, and this state needs to figure out something beyond coal. Like at some point, coal is not going to be the king of West Virginia. It's still going to try and hold on as most
I
of
thought
the
the king of West Virginia was Joe Manchin.
oh well,
He's the king of everything right now.
he's part of it. Like his family, the Justice family, the Moores and Capitos and all that stuff. I mean, all these people are old coal families, and that they still control most of West Virginia. Most of the political power in West Virginia is still in coal. And perhaps as we move past this generation, we might see new leadership, but it's hard. I mean, I see the kids of these guys starting to run for Congress and Senate, and parts of the state government that are Moores and Capitos and mansions and all that fun stuff. So, but yeah, it's frustrating. It's kind of the unholy alliance between government and these industries. We've had I would like to have. I like the idea of solar. I really do, but I think it should be more of an individual thing rather than in West Virginia. There's been a company that's bought up several hundred acres of land, and they want to put a solar farm there. And one is incredibly land intensive. You're cutting down a ton of trees to put up these solar things, so you're kind of cutting out one benefit to your environment.
But the other thing about it is that solar is practical if the U.S. government doesn't subsidize oil costs.
Yeah,
solar is financially viable when oil is over $100 a barrel, which it has been in the past. But for the U.S., because they subsidize American oil companies to have cheap production, give them access to the land with no cost, et cetera,
yep,
they are making it so that solar doesn't work. Get the government out of the way. Solar and small wind are immediately viable.
Yeah.
Plus nuclear. I don't want to get started on it too much, but obviously there is not capacity in any other alternate fuel except for nuclear to stop using fossil fuels in the next 10 years. So if it's really a big deal, if it's really important, it's a binary solution. If you want to save the earth, if you truly believe that the earth is going to be destroyed by fossil fuel use in 10 years, your only choice is nuclear. So whenever people tell me that they don't want to use nuclear, they're telling me that they don't really think the earth is going to be destroyed.
But here's the problem is that one, the United States government is kind of regulated to where it's stuck in a 1980s is the last type of nuclear facility we can build. If we're even allowing a nuclear facility to build. The industry has become so reliant on government handouts to take those chances to build these new nuclear reactors, the thorium based and that type of stuff, that it's going to be hard for us to really move into. I mean, I'd love to see new thorium based nuclear reactors put into place, but we're going to see that once China does it, and China's kind of on the verge of doing it themselves. So we'll be behind, and I know there'll be a scramble for us to kind of utilize that technology. But once we see how successful a thorium-based nuclear reactor, the safety that's built, the safety redundancies that are built into it, I think you'll see much better acceptance of nuclear moving forward, rather than relying on that the kind of the Simpsons nuclear reactor, But thanks for telling us all about the COP26. Anything else you want to share about the conference?
I want to know what time it is for Jordan.
Oh, I'm
I
in
know.
Colorado, so I'm fine.
All right. See, I
Yeah,
thought you
yeah.
were in Glasgow right now.
No, it would be 3 a.m. in Glasgow.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I don't feel bad for keeping you up then. Just in
Yeah,
Colorado.
I was feeling bad when I came. I was like, man, what time is it for you? And he's like, I'm in Colorado. I was like, oh, okay, you're good.
Yeah,
Whereabouts in Colorado, Jordan?
Keystone, just on holiday.
Nice. I used to ski A Basin all the time.
Oh,
Went to high school in Colorado.
So let's talk about some of the other news of the week. I think the big news for everybody is the loss of an icon. Betty White passed away. She, 2021 took its last victim on the last day of the year, and kind of the most egregious victim of the year.
Have you seen the meme of Betty White sacrificed herself so that we
Yes.
could live on? I welled up with tears when I saw that. I'm like, oh my God, it's just amazing.
But you think of a person that would be the type of person to do that, it would be Betty White.
I mean, I honestly don't know anything about what she's like personally. She seems lovely and charming. And I guess that you don't get lived that old unless you are. But yeah, I just, so many things. Like I do recommend everybody who can go back and watch the first season of the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Fabulous.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And people who think our society isn't getting any better socially should see what that's like. The way women were treated, right? I mean, it was right all the time. People just slap women on the ass, and men would slap women on the ass. The whole first season is about people telling Mary, Mary, it's crazy you want to go have a career. Why don't you just come home and get married? Blah, blah, blah. And, Betty White is an integral part of that.
Yeah.
She's a great part of that ensemble.
She was the slut of the show.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Completely liberated. And it's funny, we lost this year also Ed Asner, who I had the pleasure of meeting in 2010 and spending a little time with. And that one just took me to my knees. I was so sad when I heard he passed away, and I was looking so forward to Betty White turning 100. It just felt like, oh, if she can make it, then we're all good. And no, I don't think we're all good anymore.
Betty White, for at least my generation, was just America's grandmother. Like, she would pop up in nearly every show as like a guest star at some point, and you just knew her. You just kind of knew her, and she always kind of played like the same kind of character. Like, for instance, I didn't get to see the kind of like younger version of Betty White. She was just always old, and she just never, like, as bad as it seemed, like, we never thought she was going to die. Like, she seemed to, like, I remember, like, when I was really young, I read a fact that she was literally older than sliced bread. Yes. And she was so older than the CCP, or like CCP, like in China. Like, that's wild to think about. Like, how old she was, and like, for my generation. And she was just there. She was just always there. So still lively, still kicking, she just was America's grandmother.
And the integral part to her is that she had that low level wickedness. Like she was that you could hang out with her and you wouldn't have to like bite your tongue as you would with your grandparents. You could probably have a nice stiff scotch with her.
She kind of reminded me, though, at least in her character on the Golden Girls, Rosen Island, of our grandmother, Lee.
Mm-hmm.
This kind of sweet, innocent, but I don't know if you remember Grandma joking about, well, what are we having for dinner tonight? Oh, chicken boobs and hips. That kind of sweet, almost like trying to be naughty, not too naughty, acceptable. She reminded me a lot of our grandmother. And she was exactly in between Grandma and Grandpa's ages. Grandpa would have been 100 in this past July, and Grandma would have been 100 next year in November. Yeah. Right in between. So I did feel kind of like we lost a grandparent this week.
Yeah, it was tough. So I put out a question on Facebook this week, and I got a lot of responses on it, and I'll pose it to you. Does Dolly Parton replace? I was hard to say replace, but does Dolly Parton kind of assume that mantle as America's most loved?
If I can quote Ghostbusters here, you're crossing the streams, David. You can't cross, because Dolly has this whole other different thing, because she is such an amazing songwriter, and so few people know that part about her, that I wouldn't want that to get lost in our other conversations. Dolly's more than a grandmother. She is, this unbelievable. I mean, I may be biased, but I don't want somebody else to take that over. Or at least I don't want Dolly Parton to be it, because I like. All right, I'm a little grieved for Betty White, but man, when Dolly goes, I will be just crushed because of the real art that she put in there. Hey, Wagner, we do read chat.
Yes. Yes, I will post them on here if I see them, as long as it's fairly
It's
clean.
not from Twitch.
Yeah, thanks for watching on Twitch. I will say the cool thing about tonight's episode is my first broadcast onto LinkedIn. LinkedIn has been traditionally very stingy about who it allows to broadcast.
I didn't even know they had a platform.
Yeah, they've been doing live for about 6 months and really very stingy on who they allowed to broadcast on live. So if you're watching, and I don't think I got anybody watching on LinkedIn, but and it doesn't tell me. So
I'll go give it a watch after this.
There you go, man. I appreciate that. So anybody who watches on LinkedIn, tell me what you think about the show. I really appreciate it. And we got quite a few comments on my personal Facebook page, which doesn't show up in this, so I can't really share. Okay, thank you.
So I just looked on Ranker for who is America's grandmother, and Dolly Parton is there at 10, but above that, some people don't get it. Tina Turner is actually number 1.
Wow.
An interesting choice. A lot of people don't realize that she is 80 years old, and she currently, she speaks fluent French and actually lives in Switzerland right now. Married to a younger guy, as you would expect. Actually, she's 82. And then Angela Lansbury is the next nominee, who's not a bad choice, although not born in the United States. But even so, she did all that. She solved all those murders. If it's not for Angela Lansbury.
Is she still alive?
I think so. It says that she's 96 years old and alive.
Holy cow. All right.
But, this is the internet. So let me just check something else.
Well, usually they just tell you they died like 5 years after they died already. So
still alive, 96 years old.
All right.
Oh my God, she's born on my birthday.
Excellent.
October 16th. October 16th. But she is older than me by 42 years. Which is pretty impressive. I don't even like the phrase America's grandmother, right? Betty White's she's a tremendous artist on her own. And let's just leave it at that.
Well, that's why I say it as America's most beloved celebrity.
Okay.
And I think Dolly is definitely America's most beloved celebrity. Now, if you had to go, if you want to do like men versus women, I would do men would be hard. I think maybe Will
Smith?
No, Willie Nelson.
Oh, yeah. I really like maybe Willie Nelson. Sean? I don't know that I would trust Willie Nelson to watch your kids or anything like that.
Why not? I would.
He's just, he's into doing his own thing. Responsibility isn't his bag.
Perfect libertarian.
But you said pay for Texas.
Yeah, well, yeah. What about Peter Davidson? I'm just kidding.
Oh, good Lord.
Yeah, I trust him with my kids.
Yeah, most beloved celebrity. Tom Hanks. How's it not Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks is great.
Yeah,
Tom Hanks is great, but there is a segment of the Q-Tardville Trumpkins who believe that he is a pedophile.
Oh
Don't
my
know,
God.
because apparently he was on the Epstein private jet at some
Are we
point.
going to allow the Trumpkins to have any say in this?
No, I mean I don't care, but
I mean,
You
No.
know who I think is an underrated one? I think The Rock. I think he's coming up there, you know, because like his movies aren't great, but everyone just likes him, and that's why they go see him.
he's
Like,
amazing in Moana.
I've got it though. I've got it. Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, Dick Van Dyke's
that's a
amazing.
good one. That's a
Dick
good
Van,
one.
and if we're going to go Dick Van Dyke, we might as well say Mary Tyler Moore too.
Oh, but she's been gone a number of years now.
Has she? Did she die?
Oh yes,
Van
Yeah,
Dyke
yeah.
died.
This way.
Didn't you know that?
it's been a long time.
Yep, 2017. You are correct.
Yeah.
So
Bad.
I'm actually while we're talking, I'm making a little tchotchke out of air dry clay, in remembrance of my sweet dog who passed away this year.
Oh,
He
Turtwig.
was 17. So I've been working on him while we talk. I miss him very, very much. I'm having a tough time without my dog.
So I'm glad I just looked this up. I'm going to now have to watch Change of Habit, which is a 1969 American crime drama musical starring Elvis Presley and Mary Tyler Moore.
No way.
Oh, that
Way.
sounds awful.
Wait,
That just
this
sounds
might fly out of my butt.
It's going to be amazing.
You just report back to us on that one.
yeah. We'll expect like a 30-minute report next week.
I got it queued up to watch it. Oh, Elvis is a doctor.
No.
He's a singing
Even
dog.
my mother wouldn't have believed that one.
Yeah. No, Mom was a huge Elvis fan. I remember her crying openly the day he died.
Bad memories.
Pop that up
Bad
for a
memories.
second.
Oh boy.
This is the
My
screenshot.
favorite-
I won't play the video, but people need to see the screenshot of Elvis as a doctor.
The front door. Look at those sideburns. Damn.
Ending.
Wow.
Oh,
So I was born in 1967, which was the year that Elvis and Priscilla got married. And so for our 40th birthday, for my 40th birthday, we decided to have a costume party since I was born in October. And I was going to go as Elvis, and my wife went as Priscilla. And so we were there, completely age inappropriate wedding. But since I went, I wanted to have like
wow.
the Elvis 1967 chops. And what I didn't realize was I should have just grown the beard and cut it down to the chops the day of the party. Instead, I started growing just the chops in like May.
Oh my.
It
Yeah.
was hilarious.
So funny.
That's dedication to your craft, man.
It is. It is.
That's so funny.
So
All right,
Betty,
what's next on our list, Dave?
yeah, Betty was not the only celebrity that we lost this last week. It's been a rough week.
Mhm.
Lost football legend John Madden passed away.
Boom!
Yeah.
Brett Favre.
He's got
Yeah.
this stick and he rubs it on his thigh. Jordan, I'm glad you got that.
Disconnected. That was sad. I mean, because Christmas Day they had done a kind of a retrospective on John Madden's career. It wasn't just, because a lot of people like Jordan's age know John Madden from being the TV commentator and the video game guy, and
Yeah.
me, I remember him as a TV commentator and then moving into video games. But he was also a very, very accomplished NFL coach for a long time.
Well,
In fact, had the highest winning percentage of NFL
All
coaches
time.
being retired. Yeah,
for anybody who
750.
100 wins, and he had a 10-year career, but he had this incredible fear of flying.
Yeah.
And they often say that if he hadn't been afraid of flying, he would have had a much longer career. We would probably think of him as the greatest coach of all time.
Yeah.
But essentially after 10 years, he's like, I just can't do it anymore. I can't get on an airplane. And so he went into broadcasting when they hooked him up with the Madden bus, and he got to drive from game to game. I don't know what he'd do if he were like, well, I do. I mean, in the end, he only did the Sunday night game.
Yeah.
So as opposed to, now where there's a game almost every other day.
Yeah, it feels like, especially with the last couple of years with COVID canceling games. I mean, we've had games on Tuesday this season. We literally had games every day of the week last year.
We
Yep.
had a 2-day. What was it? Just 2 weeks ago, we had a double header on a Tuesday. It was
Yeah.
nuts. Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, so John Madden passed away. Another name from football lore, Dan Reeves passed away yesterday.
Running back for the Cowboys, head coach,
yeah,
won the Super Bowl with the
9
Broncos.
Yeah, appeared in 9 Super Bowls, lost most of them.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he won a couple with the Cowboys, but he lost quite a few as coach, getting obliterated when he was coach of the Broncos.
Right. He was one of those guys who, he was a Tom Landry disciple.
Yeah.
And Tom Landry and his disciples all clung to old stuff way too long in the NFL. When Tom left, I was sad. Grew up a huge Cowboys fan. And it was sad when Tom Landry left, but it was clearly time.
Yeah. Yeah, it was for Tom. And I knew, how big of a controversy it was when Jerry Jones came in and fired him after the first year.
That was the second controversy. The first one was that he came in and he removed all the no shoes, no shirt, no service signs, so his friends from Arkansas could come watch the games. Sorry.
7.
I've been sitting on that joke since '89.
Nice.
Your time has come.
Yes.
Let's see, who was the other? Bishop Desmond Tutu. A lot of people don't. His notoriety had waned over the last maybe 10 years or so, but he was very integral in the ending of apartheid in South Africa. He had brass balls. He was just, the South African authorities wanted to prevent him from moving into the Archbishop's residence in Johannesburg in Pretoria, and he said, "No, I'm moving in," and threatened basically challenged the South African authorities, who had no compunction of throwing people in jail, and to arrest him, and they never did. He was always that constant thorn on the side, going international and kind of bringing the plight of the South African people to the international stage, and really, getting, we got to a point where companies like Coca-Cola and, multinational companies had enormous amounts of pressure to boycott, South Africa, entertainers going to like Sun City, which is a big resort in South Africa.
I ain't gonna play Sun City. I don't remember whose song that is, but
it's Ricky something.
Yeah, McEnroe turned down $1 million to play a tournament with Bjorn Borg there.
Yeah. So
Desmond Tutu, you're right. He's the figurehead of that. And the other thing about it is that because he was such a constant tie back to the old world, because he's an archbishop, right? This is Catholicism, the old religion, stuff like that. It puts a face on it in the context of saying, look, this is the evolution of the church, in that, we're now standing up for, all the bad things that the Catholic Church did when they brought things to the Americas and stuff like that. And so I thought he was an amazing spokesperson for what he was doing at that time.
And he's chosen an interesting way to be, I hate to use the word, disposed of. It's something called aquamation. And I didn't have a chance to read the article on it, but I'm assuming it's something with water rather than fire.
It's essentially, did you watch Breaking Bad?
I did not watch Breaking Bad.
All right. Well, it's essentially using acid and stuff to dispose of all the mass of the body. And then the bones that remain behind are very brittle and they're crumpled up into ashes. And that's what's given to the family. But it costs a significant amount less, and you can return the essence, the good stuff, to the earth.
Yeah. Nice. What do you want to say, Gordon?
Breaking Bad.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I live 2 blocks from Walter White's house.
Nice.
I heard that that they have a problem with people throwing pizza on that house.
They do. There's now a fence around the house and a sign that says, please take your pictures from across the street. And they had the most garish Christmas decorations I've ever seen in my life. Out of respect to the family, the woman who owns the place, her name is Joanne, very sweet woman. I've met her once. I haven't taken pictures because I just don't want to go there with her. But I thought about it when I drove by and saw the Christmas decorations yesterday. Like, ugh. This needs to be memorialized. So I can't stay on much longer, guys.
That's fine.
I have to go back to work.
Go back to work, enjoy it.
My wife has to do that tomorrow too.
We've only got a few more things to cover anyway.
Oh my God, I don't want to.
And it's about to get super geeky when we talk the whether or not censorship, being banned from Twitter is censorship.
No, it's a private company. There's no guarantee of.
But it's not only a private company. Censorship means that people are actively working to stop you from publishing something. It doesn't mean that you can't get on my thing. I've given a few examples of it. You know, if I promise to drive you down to DC for the Million Man March, and then I say, you know what, I can't make it, I'm not censoring you. You just have to find another way to get there and to do your thing.
Yeah.
And in this world where, you know, I just tested it actually with no credit card, I was able to put up a website in under 10 minutes and put on there, David Valente is an idiot. Okay, that's my exercise of free speech. David Valente is an idiot.com, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But now anybody in the world can access that site. So I am not being censored.
I'll send you some porn pictures.
Oh, dude. So I don't know where you were, Dave, but you work obviously working in IT. But for me, I was at a startup when the XXX domain was first released. And so one of the funniest things to do was to buy your friend's name .xxx and then put up a website. Funny as hell. And it was great because it was like $50 for a XXX domain, but it was so worth it.
That's excellent.
Wow.
I know what to get you for your birthday, Care Bear.
Well, I was thinking actually your picture.
I'm a teacher though, so I've thought about setting up my own OnlyFans to supplement my income and taking pictures of things like spaghetti on my feet. And
well, you know, I always wanted to do like learn how to bake a bunch of Mexican pastries and do a site called OnlyFlans.
Oh,
OnlyFlans is good. So Jordan is also leaving when Care Bear leaves. So it's just going to be you and me for the geeky conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm going to miss out on the CEASE conversation or Central and Eastern European conversation.
Oh, yes.
What are we going to talk about?
Ukraine and Russia.
Oh, yeah.
That's my degree.
Oh, okay.
Я говорю немного русский язык, but my family is originally from the Ukraine.
Oh, wow.
Yep, we came over in 1904. Well,
wow.
My grandfather did. He got to watch the Red Sox win 5 World Series and then never again in his lifetime. Crazy.
I mean, there's people worse yet who've been waiting their entire lives to watch any of their teams win one.
It's true.
Cleveland.
Plain. But I do think that, I mean, it's interesting. I don't think Putin actually wants to go to war with Ukraine. I think that it's just posturing. He wants something else. And so he's doing that to get either, some of the sanctions lifted or some assets unfrozen or something like that. Because honestly, a land war in the time of COVID, it would be terrible.
No.
Insane.
I think what he wants, I think he sees the United States as a waning empire, and it's not going to take long. And he wants to keep NATO out of Ukraine. He wants to keep NATO out of the Baltic states. And when the United States is no longer financially able to provide that protection of NATO, then he wants to reestablish, if he's still kicking, reestablish the Soviet Union.
I think the part of that's exactly correct, because, for instance, he doesn't really get anything out of invading Ukraine because the Donbass region is already pretty much just another de facto state of
Mhm.
Central and Eastern Europe, where it's already pretty much Russian. And the only thing that he's going to get by adding it is more debt, more of a, they have to actually start taking care of that infrastructure. There's not much there that's worth fighting for. So this is
Right.
all, it's just kind of playing chicken, because
Also,
NATO, he's already got that as a buffer zone. So it's not like an actual security threat. It's just him wanting to push, see
also
what he can get.
Russian oil goes through Ukraine, right? It goes to oil that goes into Europe goes through the Ukraine.
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Until, was it that one pipeline comes through, but that'll be through the Baltic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's fundamentally, it's clearly just posturing. The problem is, of course, that, they can posture and have little skirmishes like, people who, see you later, people who, are familiar that there are all these skirmishes that happen around the world in contested places like Kashmir or, the China-Vietnam border. There are all these little wars that happen, and people die, and we don't want to see the Ukraine-Russian border flare up into a place where there's constant small little conflicts that are happening and people get killed all the time. That would suck.
Yeah. Going back to our comments about Angela Lansbury, she gave Maine a bad reputation with all the murders that happened there.
She gave what with all the murders that happened there?
Maine.
Yes.
Comment from Craig Violette about Angela Lansbury. So that's why
That's what I said. You're mansplaining to me. I said she solved all those murderers. She kept them off the street. She reduced the American crime rate. It's a very important thing. Also, bed knobs and broomsticks. But
Oh, there you go. So yeah, I mean, as far as Russia goes, I mean, I think you're right that it's really posturing, but I also think Vladimir Putin is stupid enough to do. Now, I don't think he's going to take all of Ukraine. I think he's just going to really kind of solidify the stuff that he already holds, and really just kind of absorb that into Russia. I think eventually, if he's still kicking around or whoever replaces him gets froggy, they'll try and take the rest of Ukraine. But I think that he sees the United States, and when we think about what's happened with the 2016 election and all that stuff, Russian interference was not meant to influence the outcome of the election. It was meant to sow seeds of discontent in the people when it comes to both their elections and their elected officials. And in some ways, they earned it, but in some ways, this is all that was really what the Russians' game was with the election interference.
yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's posturing. There's no question. I mean, Putin's a crazy dude, right? I mean, he's been in
Oh, yeah.
power for forever. He's had these puppet presidents. Are
Oh yeah,
But
Dmitry Medvedev. Yeah,
yeah, he's fundamentally, an old school tyrant.
yeah.
It's unclear what's going to happen. I mean, what's weird is that he has been around for a long time, and he doesn't really look that old, right? I mean,
Hey, he's still playing hockey. He's just
Yeah.
scored. I want to say like 6 or 7 goals
yeah,
with his,
amazing. I saw that footage.
with his line mate, the president of Belarus, who only got 2 goals. You can't score more than.
Yeah, he can't score more than Putin, but
Yeah.
no, because he was being considered for the hockey team, for the Olympic hockey team. Decided it was more important that he work on, the
Ukraine.
Soviet state. Um, the thing is that the best thing that we can do, right, to fight Putin is liberty, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if you have free people in Russia, they do a better job of pointing out the contrast to how crazy he is. The problem is that he responds to that with incredible brutality.
Yep.
People get arrested, people get killed, stuff like that. So
And to the outside agitators, he will send the state security services to poison them. So I
Yep.
mean, there's no one is out of reach of Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe there's an argument that he actually has declared war at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument, but
I mean, that would be the interesting thing about it. We can go back to Crimea and say, okay, this is our justification, right?
Yeah.
We're going to shut you off from the rest of the world because of that. That's an
So-
act of war.
let's say that he does do something with Ukraine in the next week or so. Joe Biden has said that that Russia will pay a heavy price. He says at this point that he's not going to put U.S. troops on the table at this point. Now we know, of course, politicians could always be influenced the other way on that one, but I think what happens is he just amps up the sanctions on steroids, and what you'll end up seeing is Russia, to counteract that, is going to cut off the flow of oil to Europe in the middle of the winter, COVID and all that fun stuff. And Europe is going to start screaming, and they're going to start.
Lucky for them, it's going to be a very warm winter in Europe. Speaking of which, you and I should probably talk about our 12-hour winter cycle, because it's going to snow at your house, right?
No, we're going to get sideswiped by it, but I don't think we're going to get anything significant from this, right? Because it's all going south of us.
Interesting. Well,
Winchester's
we are
gonna
going
get-
to get snow, supposedly. We'll see.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I have my snowblower that I brought down from Massachusetts, which is more than up to the task of really any snowstorm that's ever happened here. Like, I was looking through what are the historic storms, and I guess the worst storm ever is the Knickenbocker storm, which is 20 inches of snow. And that's,
I mean, I remember before I moved to DC, like the 2 years before I moved to DC, they had a couple of Snowmageddon events in DC that shut it down for like a week. This is why DC really went to that whole starting getting people to work from home and
Yeah.
increasing the infrastructure was
Right.
that event.
well, because DC's not prepared to deal with it, which makes sense because they don't get enough snowfall to really be prepared to
Yeah.
really have to deal with it. I mean, in many ways, kind of like Texas not being prepared for it either. But I mean, I'm hopeful. They say that we're going to get between 2 and 5 inches. I would love that. I have missed snow. I don't know that I would go out and shovel, but I certainly would go out and play in the truck. That would be
Yeah, I've got a 16-year-old down the street that'll shovel for like $20.
nice.
Best $20 I ever spent.
Yeah. Well, because you're not going to get any snow per se. So
Yeah, well, and we're in a good area. I mean, we got quite a bit of snow last year. It seemed like every week we had one day of snow each week for probably about 3 months. And if it's a warmer winter for us, I'm not going to be sad. Although like you, I do like snow. I don't have a problem with it. Plus, I work from home pretty much every day, so
yeah.
it's not a big thing for me. But yeah, this has been a strange storm. I was watching the track of it yesterday. It's producing tornadoes in Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama. I guess it did some severe weather in North and South Carolina and Georgia this afternoon. But right behind it was this cold front that was, this frigid air that's starting this snow cycle, and it's just going to really hit the Virginia area. Skirt to the south, right just south of us. We might get an inch or so if we get anything. So it'll be interesting to see. There's supposed to be another big storm coming up next week, and we'll see if that brings some more snow to the area.
Yeah. All right. I distracted us there a little bit.
Yeah.
What's next on our list?
Let's see. Censorship. So woke up to the news this morning that America's darling Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene received a yeeting from Twitter. Now, it's not a full yeeting. Her account was permanently banned. It's her personal account. Her congressional account is still up. So I guess she could spread the crazy to her congressional account now.
Right.
She's not banned. Like, I think that's the biggest thing. And within our circles, there's been quite the debate as to, big tech censorship and things like that. In the last year, I've been hit by a couple times where I've had the ability to go live on Facebook taken away from me for jokes I made on the internet like 2 years ago, 4 years ago. I mean, it's kind of the algorithms get you every once in a while, and I never felt like I've been censored.
Well, because the thing about it is I mean, there's like 10 different levels of this, and I've been obviously having this argument on a long thread on Facebook that I should
Mhm.
probably post on right now, saying we're talking about it right now.
And you're all
But
wrong.
but if I can put up a website and post videos and thoughts and words there, and anybody in the world can get to it, I'm not being censored.
Oh,
Twitter is a for-profit company. They make their money not because of their technology. They make their money because of their audience. That is their product. They cultivate and maintain their audience. And so people who don't understand that Twitter isn't doing this. I mean, Twitter isn't doing this because, let me finish this on. I'll go to the next one. Twitter isn't doing this because they want to censor people. They're doing it because it benefits them business wise. And I'll give you a great example of this, right? There's never been a more anti-gay mainstream network than Fox. Okay. That's just where they are. Fox like that. But who ran Glee? Arguably the gayest show ever on television. Fox, because it was just about money. It had nothing to do with anything else. It's not political, and that's where Twitter is. Twitter doesn't really care what you say. They care about whether or not it's going to drive people away from their platform, whether or not it's going to make people quit. And so they're like, you know what? That makes people quit. So we're not going to allow that kind of shit on Twitter.
yeah,
And that's it.
yeah.
And the idea that you are censored because you can't broadcast on a network. You know what? That's like me complaining that I'm being censored because I can't get a radio show on the air.
Yeah, this is on Facebook, but I can't get it on CBS. So
Yeah.
I'm being censored by CBS. Well, I'm
Yep.
being censored by every television platform. I mean,
Right.
why? I don't get this whole argument that, oh well, yes, they're a private company, but they take government money, or they tell they're taking direction from the federal government. Um, I take direction from the federal government. I'm not happy about it.
Everybody does. There's not a person around who can't say that they haven't consumed something that was inspected by a federal person at some point in time.
Exactly. Now, do we want this to happen? No, absolutely not. I mean, we think it's a great waste, and really these platforms started out as that, but really when there were more free market of ideas and kind of the Wild West, but when those companies became successful, the government the government gets involved, whether through regulation, through, well, if you don't donate more money to my campaign,
Right.
we'll put more regulation on your, we'll take away, Section 230 protections. We'll do this, we'll do that. It's to me, it's not. It just doesn't make sense. Their whole argument about, well, they've got government involvement. Again, censorship protection, like it's not constitutional. Well, no, government protect. The government protection against censorship is protecting you from the government censoring you. If a private organization wants to remove you from that platform, you got to go.
Yep.
You don't have to go home, but you got to get the hell up out of here.
Exactly. Because there's so much else that people could do to try to get their word out. They want access to this fancy audience that somebody else has built.
Yep.
In the same way, I want to broadcast on CBS. Why do I have to put my show on there? Are they blocking me? No. And you know what? If I paid CBS enough money, they'd put my show on.
Oh yeah.
So where's the deal, right? I mean, what's the problem?
Yep.
It's insane how stupid some people are about this.
Yeah, it's been a frustrating argument to see today. I'm like, no, that it's a private company that can make the decision on who appears on the platform
Yep.
or not, and we don't get to decide that. So
Yeah. And so all you people out there who say that it's censorship when Twitter or Facebook or somebody deplatforms you, now that that is happening. People are deplatformed. You just don't understand how the internet works. That's your
yeah,
problem. Because look, here we are broadcasting, and we could do a live stream from our own website if we wanted to.
yeah,
We just would rather take advantage of Facebook's opportunity that they give us for free to
exactly.
potentially reach, everybody on Facebook.
Yeah. Um, as do you know what the offending tweet was from her, or was it just a compendium of her
I don't know. No idea.
stupidity? Yeah.
Yep, I haven't heard anything about it.
Well, and yeah, she can get her message out still, even on Twitter. That's the thing. She can still get her message out on Twitter because it was only one account that was banned.
Yeah, exactly. And more than that, she could post everything that she wants to and ask her friends to, hey, here's a new post from Marjorie Taylor Greene, and it would be just as popular and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, I mean, what is she complaining about?
I don't know.
It's completely fictitious.
So part of me was wondering if this might be a kind of prelude to Thursday. We're having the anniversary of the January 6th riots at the Capitol.
Yeah.
Um,
Preemptive eating?
it could have been. I mean,
don't know.
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think she's posted enough dumb stuff to earn the ban hammer, and but I'm expecting some widespread fuckery
Yeah.
on January 6th, whether it's from the former president himself or from his surrogates or random Twitter denizens that want to stir up some stuff. I think there's been a push to have some kind of remembrance vigils by some on the left. I don't know. It's probably not something I'm going to be all that keen about participating in, but I'll be interested to see if there's any trouble from those, like their counter protest to these remembrance vigils that they're holding.
Well, what I do like about things like that is that everybody shows up and they get their faces on camera, and it makes it easy to identify them later.
Yes, January 6th proved that one.
The one thing that I think is really a clever thing is that they've put out at one of the big protest things a picture of Joe Biden, and they've asked people to spit on it. However, secretly they're collecting all that as evidence for 23andMe.
The DNA database.
Exactly.
There you go.
These guys don't fall for anything.
Yeah. No, that's I'm not a fan of Joe Biden.
Oh, who is? I don't even think Jill Biden's a fan of Joe Biden. She might have been a fan of
I know who Joe Biden is
when he was still sane, but I mean, he's clearly lost it, and he sniffs people's hair.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of him, but the whole "Let's Go Brandon" stuff. I curse in my household. We say it. If you want to fuck Joe Biden, fuck Donald Trump's whole ass too. I know that's probably not good for LinkedIn, but
I'm sorry, because why?
No, I'm just saying that if you are going to, I don't get the euphemism. Just say it.
Well, I mean, it's right, exactly. I mean, I do like the idea that it's like the way that it came to pass. I find that funny.
Yeah, that was funny. But
Right.
it got, I mean, it's overplayed at this point. You're like,
Yeah, right. Somebody said it the other day in like the Santa Claus tracker or something like that. Right. There's a guy who's talking with the president during the Santa Claus tracker. He's like, "Let's go, Brandon."
And then Joe Biden was like, "Yeah, let's go, Brandon."
Which is awesome. But so what? I mean, At a certain point, things just become dumb. I mean,
Yeah.
this is Let's Go Brandon's going to be like Rick rolling. It's going to be around for forever now.
Yes.
Like even like it doesn't matter who the next Democratic president is, they're still going to say "Let's go Brandon."
Mm-hmm.
But
Get
the
me
idea of the whole country, right? A whole racetrack, a whole NASCAR racetrack, everybody chanting "Fuck Joe Biden." Oh, what is that?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the whole thing, how it came about was just ridiculousness. But yeah, it's become overplayed. Um, I don't know. I mean, I think the vitriol is just over the top
Yeah,
when it comes to Biden. Um, and I know that people will be like, "Oh, what did they say about Trump?" Trump's a dude that probably reveled in that stuff.
yeah.
Um, he's a tough New York kid that could handle himself on that. But uh, like I said, we should ratchet down our political insults. We should ratchet down um, our our discourse when it comes to politics, because I think if we're going to get to a point where it's too, we're going to go beyond the point of no return when it comes to that discourse. And some people probably think that we already have, and we're going to end up in a situation where uh, real real world issues are going to real people are going to get hurt over it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that I don't know. We're so split. And here's the thing: like every now and then, so now just to get real a little bit, and I know you feel this too. It's so frustrating. You just want to walk away.
Yeah.
I just want to say, fucking let these idiots have the shitty world that they've created. The problem is that it affects everybody else,
Oh
right?
yeah.
I mean, these guys, these assholes, if we leave them to it, they're going to make cannabis illegal again.
Yep.
They're going to ban same-sex marriage. They're going to do all these morally right things that they think are morally right and restrict our liberties. And so you got to fight them for it. It just sucks.
Yeah. Or if it goes even worse, I mean, let's say that 2024 goes sideways and we end up in a shooting war.
Yep.
And a civil war. Or you get these internet tough guys talking about, oh, civil war. I'm armed to the teeth, and all you're going to be is weapons cache. Somebody's going to eat you in the first 5 hours of the Civil War. Take all your weapons. Settle down there, Meal Team 6. Uh, no one wins a civil war.
Right.
No one wins. No one would win that, because you're talking about the destruction of, and it's, the country's divided. Like back in the 1860s, it was divided north and south. But there's pockets of this all over the country. So it's not going to be like this even, oh, well, these states are going to go this way and these states are going to go this way. It's going to be all over.
Yeah.
You're going to have, all the famed Michigan militias. You're going to have you're going to have rural New York versus the urban New York. I mean, it's not going to be a pretty thing. So anything that we can do to kind of ratchet down that discourse, I think is beneficial.
Well, I think the only thing we can do to ratchet it down is to make the stakes lower,
Yes,
to give government less power.
exactly.
Because in the beginning, so I've got this idea in the back of my head of a way to say this, and it's not quite formed perfectly, but I'm going to try it out here for the first time. Political deep dive exclusive, Dan Fishman's new political thinking. In the beginning, Americans fought like hell to keep the government out of guns and abortion, those two things. Now we have a system where Americans are fighting to have government control guns and abortion. The first way allowed us to be friends, even if we disagreed. The second way requires us to be enemies. That's worse.
Yeah.
We are required by our system now, if we want our rights to bear arms, or if we want our rights to bodily autonomy, we are required to be enemies of each other. And that's terrible. Why does it have to be that way? If you're fighting for your own affirmative rights, then you don't have to be enemies with anybody else. Say, yeah, I just want the right to do this, and you will get the right to do that, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to use government to stop you from doing the thing that's bad, that I think is bad.
As long as you're not doing anything to actually harm me.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and pro-life people will say, oh, well, you know, abortion is murder, blah, 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 blah. You know what? I get the argument. You have to convince more people that you're right. You alone saying that abortion is murder doesn't make it murder.
No.
But if you can get, you know, enough people together to pass a constitutional amendment, congratulations, you've won. You do it. You pass a constitutional amendment. Abortion should be illegal. But you can't win it just at the state houses.
No.
You can't win it just at, you know, just by appointing judges. Although, I mean, you know, they are actually winning it somewhat. But
yeah, you can make that
you know,
argument.
fundamentally, people who know anything about what's actually happening with technology knows that home done abortion is going to be very easy very soon.
Yeah.
In fact, there's already, you know, cases, people who are sending packages out that will allow you to do that stuff. So then the question becomes, what are you going to do about that? You're actually going to make it, because nobody's actually making it illegal to have an abortion, right? They're not prosecuting the women. They're prosecuting the doctors that provide the abortion. So now they're going to have to start prosecuting the women who get the abortions in the first place. And that's crazy. But
There's some crazy people out there who want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
And gladly, they're a very, very, very solid minority. But and when they try and put that out there, everyone's like, no, no, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that the courts are really starting to encroach on those rights, but you can also say that if the federal government, you know, if the Supreme Court steps into Roe v. Wade, all it does is makes it a state issue, and then the states can make their decision. I mean, it's not perfect. I know that, you know, like my state of West Virginia is one of the hardest states to get an abortion. One, because we've got like one abortion provider in the entire state of West Virginia.
Right.
And you know, like when we had the initial COVID thing, the first thing that was put on the non-essential medical practices list that was, you know, stopped during that initial period was abortion. Like they were like, it's a non-essential medical procedure that, you know, you don't need to perform abortions.
Right.
Even though people were still getting pregnant at that point, probably more so because they're stuck at home.
Well, and you know, you think about you know, Ron Paul, who's a pretty strong pro-life advocate.
Yeah.
However, he did not believe in banning RU-486. He said, first of all, you know, nobody knows if the person's actually pregnant at the time when they get it. He's like, you know, I'm telling you as an OBGYN, we don't know if they're pregnant or not.
Yeah.
But secondly, you know, how are you going to police all of this? You know, what kind of security state is required to prevent people from getting these drugs? Or do we want them to be, because it's not complicated to make. People can make it at home. You know, do we want to shut them down? Are we going to shut down these RU-486 labs, et cetera? Or, you know, because Ron Paul is, you know, fundamentally a statist to some extent, you know, he's like, or do we want it to be, you know, a situation where, you know, people are getting health care, you know, getting it provided in a safe manner?
Sure.
So it is what it is.
Yeah.
And we're reaching the end of our 90 minutes, I think, as well.
I think so. One more thing I wanted to talk about.
Sure.
Happy birthday to Kane Tanaka of Japan, who just turned 119 years old today. She is the world's oldest living person.
Yep.
She is 3.5 years short of the world record, Jean Calmette, who lived to 120.5 years, French woman. So,
yeah.
You know, we lost Betty White at 99 years old, but we got somebody 119. She's the 4th or 5th oldest human being in recorded history. So, anything else for you this week, sir?
That's it.
All right. Well,
I think it's pretty good. Good show. I'm
Yeah.
excited for the new year. I hope that 2022 brings
Oh,
us
yeah.
past COVID, brings us past being required to be enemies with each other, and that even though it's the Christmas thing to say, I hope that we have peace on earth and goodwill towards men.
That's right.
Me
And
and
we have one more reface as well.
Happy New Year, Happy New Year, here we are.
Push the tempo, 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 push the tempo.
There we go.
What movie is that Countach from?
That was the was it the Wolf of Wall Street? I don't
Interesting.
remember.
All right, sounds good, man. See you next
Thanks
week.
everyone for joining us all across the platforms. We got people on YouTube, got people on Twitch and Facebook and LinkedIn. Give us a like and a share. We really appreciate it. And we will see everyone next week at 10 o'clock on the Political Deep Dive. Take care, everybody.